All right, good evening, Stonegate. Welcome to our Equip Night. If you're in the lobby, go ahead and make your way with your coffee and everything. We are so glad you are here. We have a very special night for you. We are focusing on Kelly Needham's new book, Purposefooled. But before we go into the actual content of Purposefooled, let me just tell you why we do these Equip Nights and what our strategy is in the way that we're doing them. These Equip Nights are not just for theological equipping, okay? Yes, you can come to these equipping nights and you can learn how to share the gospel with a Muslim. You can learn how to share the gospel with a Roman Catholic or with a Mormon, or you might in the future learn how to articulate the Trinity. You're gonna learn a lot of cool things in these Equip Nights, but we also wanna equip you to not just share the gospel with your neighbors, but to share the gospel with yourself, right? That's an important aspect that I don't think people think about, right? So theological development means being able to share good theology with yourself. If you don't know what your purpose is, learning how to theologically engage with Mormons and Muslims is only gonna do you harm. It's gonna make you prideful. It's gonna make you wanna be seen. It's gonna make you wanna be remembered. You're gonna look at all your savvy and the way that you have been able to share and articulate the gospel with these people, and it's just gonna puff up that chest. So you have got to be equipped with what your purpose is. So tonight is still a theological development equip night. It's just theology that's aiming for your heart, not just for others. Yes, we're gonna learn how to articulate to others later, but first you have to articulate the gospel to yourself. And that's why I'm so excited about tonight. And that's why tonight is an Equip Night. Kelly Needham almost needs no introduction. If you've been around Stonegate at all, she is the Kelly Needham, right? She's almost more famous than Jimmy Needham around here, right? In fact, she is the one that keeps Jimmy on his toes and keeps him in check, right? So Kelly and Jimmy, if you know them, they have 5 amazing kids, have been stellar volunteers and then staff members and leaders and teachers here. Kelly leads the women's teaching program. If you've ever been in that, then what Kelly does is basically she takes you through with Lindsay Schott through weeks of content and learning how to teach and do Bible studies and lead Bible studies with women. It's just an amazing time of equipping. Kelly and Jimmy also lead host a podcast called the Clearly Podcast. If you are not listening to the Clearly Podcast, that is something that you need to change today. That means tomorrow, Monday, go search on your Apple Podcast and look for the Clearly Podcast. You're going to get tons of great content. Just go through and listen to that. My wife listens to it all the time, and it's just an amazing 20-minute power-packed discipleship moment. So go and listen to that. If you want to be discipled, that's one of the best ways to be discipled, through podcasts, and then go seek out someone to disciple you with that same content. So I want to introduce to you Kelly, who's going to be leading tonight. She just wrote the book, Purposefooled. I want to encourage you to go buy that. You can also look up her previous book, Friendish. If you haven't read that, that's another amazing read. So go and buy that as well. But let's welcome Kelly Needham to the stage. Thank you, Kelly, for doing this.
Praise be to God. There's some good happening because of the grace of God, right? And that's true for you as well. So I'm so glad that you're here. I heard there's a football game on. They won? Yes. Good job, we won. If you know the Needhams, you know that's not our forte, sports, but I'm really glad that you're here because I think this matters so much. So did you guys get a piece of paper when you walked in? You did. I hope you have a pen. There's some in front of you because we're just going to start this Equip Night just in an old-fashioned exercise like you're in class. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down 10 things you did this week somewhere on that page. You might want to save some room for notes for later, but just write 10 things that you did this week. They could be as small as changing diapers or caring for sick children or doing your job, or could be as big as writing a book if you're working on something like that. Whatever. So 10 things that you did this week. Write them down on your page. 10 things. You don't think much about it, just write it down. Write down a list of things you did. You could think your spouse came home and at the end of the night where you're like, I need you to know sometimes Jimmy comes home and I'm like, I need you to know that I organized this game closet today that was just a mess of cards, and I also did this. So just add that list on there, okay? Hopefully you're close. Are we close to our 10 things? Raise your hand if you have them. We're getting there. Okay, wow. As you're writing those things down, some of the things in my week this week, I thought it would include some more prep for tonight than it did. I actually had a couple of sick kids this week, so a lot of my week was holding sweet little babies. It's one of my favorite things to do, but was not what I planned on, a detour week for me. Maybe that was what your week was. So tell me if when you're there, raise your hand. A few of you there? We got at least 7 things, maybe? Okay. Now, I want you to circle the things on that list that are most in line with what you think your purpose is in life. So when you look back at your week, I want you to circle the things you did this week that are most in line with what you think your purpose is in your life. All right. Most of you guys there? I got some head nods a little bit. Okay. Well, tonight we are talking about purpose, and one of the biggest challenges that I found in writing a book about purpose and interviewing people about purpose and doing research about purpose was how hard it was for people to see themselves and see their need for this content initially. Most people had a hard time seeing why they needed help in this area. So I want to just mention some things, some clues that you may have in your life that you have a purpose problem. You might have a purpose problem if you are looking, maybe you're in school and you're looking at the end of school, graduation, and there's a bright world of opportunity in front of you, but you feel terrified to choose any path for fear that it might be the wrong one. You may be on the other end of the spectrum facing retirement and feeling anxious. Not because you don't have enough money or you don't have enough things set aside for your financial situation, but because you don't know how to survive without doing the work that you've been doing. Maybe you feel stuck in the set of tasks in your life right now. Maybe there are things you don't feel good at and you didn't ask for. You may be caregiving for somebody. You may be in an entry-level job that just you had to take to pay the bills, but it's not your favorite. You may be in school and you don't like the type of classes you have right now. You might have a purpose problem if you find it impossible to rest, to take a day off. When you don't have work in front of you, you don't know what to do and how to be. It might be that you don't feel motivated to do the work in front of you. Whether that's domestic tasks or tasks at your job, might be spiritual tasks or things related to friends and family, but you just look at the things in front of you and go, I don't have the energy, and I don't care. You might have a purpose problem if you look at the list that you just wrote and you have less than all of them circled. If you have less than all the things circled on your page, I would say there's a problem with your understanding of purpose. It may be that you've been prohibited from doing what you love because of circumstances in your life. Sickness, your own, a child's, a parent's, maybe pregnancy. You were doing something you loved and now you have another kid and you weren't planning on it this season of life. Maybe you feel like you're in a workplace that you've hit your ceiling of upward mobility and you know that there's more potential for you, but it's not available at your current line of work. Maybe it's your finances aren't in order to do the things you want to do and you just feel benched. This is when I began to see a purpose problem in my life, is I began to feel benched. And that began when I married my fabulous husband, Jimmy. Not because of Jimmy, but because when we got married, his career as a music artist took off. And we were 2 college kids at Texas A&M, headed out into the world with very average jobs in front of us, and then we had this sharp left turn of, okay, my husband's gonna be a famous Christian recording artist. And that sounded great in theory until I was on the road with him. And then my life was, Kelly, you're so lucky to be married to him. And oh my gosh, your life is amazing because of this awesome thing you're attached to. And he's preaching the gospel from stage, and he's sharing the good news with people, and people are getting saved, and people are being ministered to. And I'm back in the corner of the room folding t-shirts and learning to use a credit card machine and training volunteers and coordinating travel and doing things that I was good at, but they didn't feel important. They didn't feel significant. I had in my own heart an earnest desire to preach the good news to people, and yet I felt like I did not have access to that type of meaningful activity. I was waiting on the sidelines for my opportunity to do something that mattered. I felt benched, and that's when I began to wrestle with God on this issue of purpose. God, what in the world could my purpose be in this season? Doesn't seem to do much to just fold a t-shirt nice and neat for somebody. Did that change your life? That it's not wrinkled when you paid $15 for it? Because I worked hard on that. To pack t-shirts in a suitcase and them not get wrinkled is actually a really hard skill, if you needed to know. I did it for a lot of years. It's a terrible feeling to feel like you're not living up to your potential. I don't know if you've been there. You have that haunting sense that you really were made for something more than the life that you're living. I don't know one person who hasn't felt that, by the way, as I've talked to people. They've been at some point in their life and felt like this isn't it. I know there's more for me. I know my life could be so much more than what it is right now. That longing that you feel is at the heart of our problems with purpose. And that longing is a legitimate and good longing, grounded in good things. But we have a lot of bad answers to that good longing. So that's what we're doing tonight, is we're gonna look at our good, legitimate longing. We're gonna look at the wrong answers to the longing, the one right answer, and how it fulfills us and frees us. So let's start with our longing. We have a legitimate, deep longing for purpose and meaning in our life. We long for glory, for grandeur, for something transcendent, for something big. We want our lives to matter. Ecclesiastes 3 says it this way, that God has written eternity on men's hearts. And don't you feel it some days? I see 4 ways that this longing shows up in my life. I wonder if you would resonate with them. It shows up this way, that I want to be great. I want to do something great, not average. Average feels like death, doesn't it? I have often told people, like, it is a struggle to do things that I'm not initially good at. I'd rather be great at it initially or just not do it. But do it and be like in the middle, average, feels really hard for me. I want to do something great. I think this is why we love the Olympics. Don't you love watching the Olympics? I want to watch somebody train for years of their life and perform at the peak of their performance along with everybody else in the world and see all that happen. We love it. We love greatness. We long for it. I think it's a good longing. It shows up this way. We want to be seen. I want to be seen. I think that's a good longing. It shows up in our kids. What parent hasn't heard 1,000 times a day, Mom, watch me. Mom, watch this. Mom, look at me. Hey, did you see? Did you see what I colored? Did you see what I did? Did you see this? They want to know, are you seeing me? Are you watching me? It's a human longing. It's a good one. I think the perversion of this is our temptation to social media and Instagram, right? I want to be seen. So I'll just post it all online. I want to be seen. I think this longing shows up in this way. We want to make an impact. I want to make an impact with my life. I want my life to matter. I want it to actually leave an effect after I'm gone. There's a famous quote from Dostoevsky, a Russian author who wrote about his experience in a Russian work camp. And this is what he wrote about it. He said, "It once came into my head that if it were desired to reduce a man to nothing, to punish him atrociously, to crush him in such a manner that the most hardened murderer would tremble before such a punishment. What punishment does he imagine? He says this: let him be constrained to pour water from one vessel into another, or to transport a quantity of earth from one place to another, in order to perform the contrary operation immediately afterwards. Give his work a character of complete uselessness. And then I am persuaded that at the end of a few days, the prisoner would strangle himself or commit 1,000 crimes, punishable with death, rather than live such an abject condition and endure such torments. Man, doesn't that justify motherhood? The same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and I do it again the next day and the next day. Does it look like anything's changing? No, it feels useless. And this guy says from a Russian work camp, that feels like death. I'd rather die than do that. But it's because we want our work to count. Is it making a difference? Is what I'm doing changing anything at all? I need to know that. It's a legitimate human longing. I need to know that what I'm doing is gonna leave an impact. This longing shows up like this as well. We want something unique to do. I want something unique to do with my life. It's why we love personality tests, strength finders tests. I want to know who I am and how I'm wired and how that's different from the just crowd around me. Is my unique person significant, meaningful? I think that's a good, healthy longing that we have. We want greatness, we want to be seen, we want to make an impact, and we want to have something unique to do. This is the deep, legitimate longing that we have in our hearts. Or to say it conversely, we're terrified of failure, obscurity, ineffectiveness, and being average. That feels terrible to us. This is a legitimate longing in your heart. It's one thing I want you to hear. That deep longing, it's a good one. It exists because you're made in the image of the galaxy designing, snowflake creating God of the universe. You're made in his image. Of course, you want something great with your life. It makes sense. It's good. Now the question is, what do we do with that? That's a big longing. It's a big gaping hole of need and longing for purpose to be fulfilled in our life. What do we do with it? I want to give a couple of answers that are out there in the world that I think are problematic. So let's talk about them. We're first going to address the secular answer. What is the world's answer for this deep longing? Because the world has an answer. The culture you're living in has an answer for this deep longing for transcendent meaning and purpose. There is a secular answer out there. Before we get to the answer, let's just talk about two factors that are at play here. The first is our current moment in time, and our technology specifically, and what it's afforded us. Because of technology, we have more opportunities than we've ever had before. If I talk to my parents and my grandparents, the thought of even writing a book is just not on many people's minds, because you would have to know the right people and be in the right circles to meet a publisher and to even have access to that. To be a TV talk show host is like out of the question unless you happen to be in the room with producers. But you know what, today, you can just get a YouTube account and a microphone on Amazon and you can get going at podcasting and host your own thing. You can do the same with books. You can get an Amazon seller account, you can write a book, publish it without any help from anybody else. The opportunities are laid out before us in an endless variety. We have more options than we've ever had, more choices than we've ever had. At the same time, we live in a culture that has annihilated the sacred. We've gotten rid of, our culture has no sense of a God above us dictating our lives. There's no outside force to inform our decision-making. We have 1,000 choices, no outside force coming to bear on us to tell us how to make those choices. And so what do we do with it? What do we do with this longing for meeting 1,000 choices and no one on the outside to tell us how to live? The answer is, we look at ourselves. We look inward. That is the culture's answer. Look toward yourself. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? What feels good to you? What interests you? Meaning is found when you look here, look inside. So I would sum up the secular answer to our longings like this, that it looks at you and says, you want to know how to find meaning in your life? Look in and then get to work and make it happen. Look in and get to work. The secular answer of the day is self-discovery. Look in. You can find 1,000 books on this. You need to discover the dream in your heart, the passion in your heart, the thing that you're good at. Look in as deep and as long and as hard as you can. And once you figure it out, if you can figure that out, now go do it. Get to work. I literally today on Instagram saw this quote from somebody releasing a new book about living a meaningful life, where they said, you can build, this was their tagline, you can build a meaningful life, step by step, goal by goal. Do you hear it in the messaging? You can do it, you can build it. It's your job to make it happen. Look in, figure it out, and then get to work. Go build your life. That is the answer from the world around us to achieve a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose in our lives. So that's the secular answer. But there's another answer that I think is problematic. It's not a secular answer. It's for those who would say, no, I believe in a God. I believe that God is real and has some bearing on my life. And so that leads us to this second answer that I will call the religious answer. So we've got a secular answer that says, look in and then get to work. And now we've got a religious answer. We have an answer for the person who wants to live for God with those deep longings. And I see 3 common religious answers that are given to our deep ache for transcendent meaning. 3 different answers given, and I think they all miss the mark a little bit. The first is just the secular answer with some Jesus clothes on. Look in and get to work, but do it for God. Go look inside yourself for what God has put there, and then go do it for God. But it's really the same message. It's still, I'm achieving my dream, but I'm doing it for God. But then, for those of us who I think we would fall into these other 2 categories, we're people in the room, you guys are my church family. Most of the people I talk to in this room, it's like we want our lives to count for the right reasons. We do. We want to live for Him and not for ourselves. And so that leaves us with these 2 other options. We can either do extraordinary things for God, or we can do ordinary things for God. So we can do extraordinary things for God. That's one option. And I've tested all of these myself, so I'll use myself as an example. When I was traveling with Jimmy, that was the longing in my heart. Before we had gotten married, I had kind of in my heart been like, God, I'm yours. I'll be single forever. Send me overseas. I had all these big dreams to do all of these things. And so when I found myself married at 20 years old on the road in the minutia of travel bookings, that was a hard awakening because I had dreamed of bigger things for myself, for God. I'm watching people travel overseas and do missions and do these things and adopt children and care for people and start ministries. And I'm online trying to coordinate, when we're going to land in Atlanta, and let me call the hotel and make sure this. And it just felt so pointless. I wanted to do a big thing for God on the outside. That big, extraordinary doing eventually traveled to an internal longing. Eventually, I saw that this was my life, and I settled into it, but I still wanted to do something great for God. But that became internal. I'm not going to change the world for God. I'm going to change myself for Him. I'm going to tackle this pride I see in my heart. I'm going to eradicate it. I'm going to give all my energy to change myself to be pleasing to Him because I want to, and I really did. I wanted God. I wanted Him to be pleased. I wanted to do big things for Him, external big things and internal big things. But sometimes the religious answer we give to these longings is not do big things for God, it's to do small things for God. For as many books as I found researching this that were like, go change the world for Jesus, there was, go do the small for Jesus. I picked up book after book that was saying the same thing. God is moving forward the world through small ways. And I actually believe that that's true. But it left me with 2 things, 2 actions I had to do in that. If I'm going to live for the ordinary and the small, it forced me to get to a place where I had to infuse every action with meaning. Because remember, I have this deep ache in me. You have this deep ache in you. I want my life to matter. But I'm changing diapers. This doesn't feel meaningful. And I know it has to get done, and I know my kid will thank me one day, and I can tell myself all these things, but in every small action I'm doing in my day, I'm doing the hard mental labor of of trying to imagine how this can matter and how that can matter, and just working really hard to try and infuse every single action with meaning because it doesn't feel meaningful. But then the other thing I found myself doing was just killing the longing in my heart. Well, that's probably sinful anyway, and it's probably self-aggrandizing to want anything like that I feel in my heart. And so I'm just going to put it to death and label it as sin and idolatry. And sometimes it is that. But that longing and that ache for more never went away for me. And so the do ordinary things for God left me wanting as well. So far, all the solutions I'm laying out, I think are all problematic because I think they all have one key thing in common. The secular answer, look in, get to work. The religious answer, look toward God and get to work. Do ordinary, do extraordinary. They're all focused on our activity. They're all focused on our doing. The secular says, I do for me. The religious answer says, I do for God. But they still both say, I do, therefore I have meaning. It's all about me and what I'm doing, and that will give me meaning. If you want a life of purpose, by and large, every message we're hearing out there is you need to do the right kind of work or do your work the right way. Then your life will be filled with purpose. It associates our purpose with particular sets of tasks. And purpose that comes from us doing, I think is very problematic. So let me give you a few reasons why I think it's problematic. It's problematic because not everybody has a choice in what they do. Not everybody's free to even choose what they would like to do. Think about people dealing with really debilitating sickness in hospitals, in cancer treatment centers. You know how much hard work it is to just weather an illness? It is so hard. And it will drain your energy. And you don't have a choice. That's the work set before you. Or what about people in poverty in other parts of the world? They don't have an option of what they would like to do with their lives. It's just what they found themselves in. People who are caring for children or parents, the incarcerated community. What about somebody who gets saved in a prison? They have no option to go out and do work they would like to do. They're in the consequences of previous actions. What about those in the beginning or the end of their life? What about children, babies? Does their life have no purpose because they cannot do? What about the other end of the spectrum, the elderly? People nearing the end of their life being cared for. Not everyone has a choice in what they do. So if we locate purpose and meaning in types of activity, we've excluded entire groups of people from a purposeful life, and that's problematic. But the second reason I think this is problematic is if you look to what you do to give your life meaning, then you will always be enslaved to what you do. It will be the thing you need to be okay. We tend to pursue types of work that seem big enough for that gaping hole of meaning. Because we want to be great and do great things, we tend to look to memorable work that will be significant enough to be remembered by others. I can't tell you how many biographies I've read of other Christians. And I think they're great. I think testimonies are extremely important. But if we're not careful, people doing memorable things that books are written about become the standard of a meaningful life. Most of us are not going to have books written about us when we die. Sorry. It's not. Does that mean our lives weren't as significant as someone else who has a bio on the shelf already? I don't think so. But if we're not careful, we'll look toward big, memorable work to be okay. We'll be drawn to it. And that isn't just in external things. I think we can parent that way sometimes. If I parent well enough, I'll create this huge, lasting legacy that will far outreach me. It could look like that in your volunteering. Anything that you're doing that you're just striving to do something that will be significant enough to be remembered. Man, that's that aching for greatness coming out in your work. Because we want to be seen, we tend to look to visible work Things like what I'm doing right now seem really significant because they're on a stage and it'll be recorded and people will listen to it and you may talk about it later, and all that's very seen and visible and can seem to be more important than what I did right before I came here, which was counseled some of my children through questions they have about faith and walking with Jesus, and through making lunch, and through being patient with situations going on in my home. They're not more important. I mean, this is not more important than that, but it sure can look like it because we want to be seen. And if we're not careful, we'll chase visible work that puts us on stages and platforms, or maybe puts us in management positions at work, or as the president of a sorority where we're seen by more people, or it could be we want to be on the board with those people who've seen us in that position. We want to be seen. It's a good longing, but when you look for it in your work, it becomes problematic. Or because we want to make an impact, we look for measurable work. I need to know my life matters, so I need to make sure that I can see the effects of my work. That makes me look to measurable work. Work that I can quantify, that I can check off a box, that I can see it's made a difference. How many people did I pray for today? How many people have I discipled? How much progress has my child made? How much money have I made? All of that, we look to things that are quantifiable to know my life has significance. Or because we want something unique to do, that good, healthy longing for uniqueness can turn us towards specialized work. Work that fits our unique skill set. Work that only I can do. Work that is all from my unique wiring and skill set. If it's something that anybody can do, like laundry, anybody can do that. They have two hands, right? That doesn't seem important. But something that maybe utilizes my unique skill for writing or teaching, that looks significant. Wherever you tend to locate your meaning, that is where your life will feel full of color and vibrant. We're all looking somewhere right now for a sense of meaning and purpose. Somewhere in your life right now, you have located, I have purpose and meaning when I'm doing this. It's probably where you feel most alive. It makes me think of the movie The Wizard of Oz. You guys have seen that, probably. The movie starts out in black and white, right? She's in Kansas, and it's in black and white. And then through the tornado, she ends up in Oz, and all of a sudden the movie's in full color, bright colors. I mean, the whole thing is just gorgeous, vibrant color. And then she comes back at the end of the movie, grounded back into reality, and it goes back to that black and white. And wherever I have located meaning in my life is where my life tends to feel full color, right? And in different seasons of my life, it's been in different places. I don't know where that is for you. Where do you feel most alive, most vibrant? It's probably where you have located your meaning. Maybe it's when you're coaching, when you're studying, when you're performing, maybe when you're overseas, maybe when you're with your kids, maybe when you're at work, maybe when you're at home. I don't know. But wherever you've put your meaning, it's the place you always want to get back to, and everything else will feel dull. Everything else that doesn't fit into that purposeful living will feel like the black and white of Kansas. You'll always be asking yourself, when can I get back to Oz? When can I get back there? When I was, after the season of traveling with Jimmy, I had an opportunity to work in youth ministry at our church back in the Houston area. It's my first time to get a chance writing, teaching, doing anything like that, and I loved it. I'd always loved studying God's word and telling like my friends at school about it, but this was my first time to really use skills of like, how would I communicate this to somebody else, and how would I write a Bible study? And I really did come alive in that. There were things that I think God has uniquely wired in me that were getting used there, and it was awesome. And then 2 years in, we moved here. I'm so glad we did. But moving's hard when you're leaving a job that you love, right? And the temptation was when we got here, as my life swelled, we had that was when our second daughter was born. Jimmy went back on tour, and I had 2 kids in diapers. Who's been there? A few of y'all. That is a life full of a lot of mundanity. And it began to feel very colorless as I left the thing that felt very vibrant and full of color. And that's when I began to realize, for a second time, I have a problem with how I perceive my life, because I don't think it's right that I've left this particular set of tasks and now I have this one, and somehow life doesn't have meaning anymore. There's a problem with that. I wrestled with God and came to a different conclusion from studying his word, and we're going to get to that next. But before we do, I actually want to pause here and give you a moment to think through, where do you look for meaning? What type of tasks and work do you tend to gravitate toward? Because we all do it. The air we're breathing right now is meaning comes from what you do. That is the world around us, what they're screaming at us. And so all of us are going to tend to gravitate toward a type of task. Memorable tasks, measurable, maybe visible ones, or specialized ones. So I'm going to put a question on the screen, and I would love for you to turn to people around you and just verbalize that. I gravitate toward this type of work. Maybe it's all of them. Maybe it's more than one. But where does your life feel vibrant and full of color? What type of work are you doing? So I should have that up here. So just take a few minutes, just turn to your neighbor, meet somebody new, and share which type of work you resonate with, that you gravitate toward. I'm going to rein us back in here. Hopefully you all got a chance to answer. I think it's helpful for us to talk about it with one another because we're all wired very differently. We give very different answers sometimes to that question, but I think at the bottom of all of our hearts is still the same deep longing. So we've talked about the secular answer, right? We've talked about the religious answer. What's the Christian answer? What is the Bible's answer? Not just a religious answer, but the real biblical answer here for us. For that, we have to go back to the beginning, Genesis 1:27. If we're going to understand our purpose, we're talking about why we were made. If you talk about what is the purpose of a coffee mug, it's to hold hot liquid. We're talking about its function. What's the purpose of a fridge? It's to keep things cold. If I have a problem with my fridge, I'm going to go to the manual. We have to go back to who made us and why did he make us in the first place. I'm going to go to Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So in the very moment that we have been made, we see that we are image bearers. And not in doing, but in being. That our description at our very creation is not attached to a role, but to a person. Our purpose is not tied to our activity, but to our breathing, not to what we do, but to our very existence. This is why the sanctity of life matters, right? why we care about unborn children? They've not done anything or accomplished anything or contributed anything, but their lives matter because they're image bearers, right? They've been made in the image of God. They have purpose in their existence because their purpose is the person they were made by and made for. Here's another place we see this answer, 1 Corinthians 8:6, where Paul says, "For us there is one God, the Father, from whom are all things and for whom we exist." We exist for a person. Isaiah 43 says it this way, "Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for" what? To do great things? I created for my glory. Whom I formed and I made, the people who I'm formed for what? For myself. I made you for me, God says to us. Or Colossians 1:16, "By him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers of authorities, all things, including us, were created through him and for him." We exist for a person. Your purpose is not a set of activities, it is a person. It is not a set of tasks, it is a person. It is not a verb, it is a noun. You were made for God. He is the source of color that you were made for. And where he goes with you, life has meaning. He is meaning. The very presence of God and our access to it is the answer for the legitimate longings in our hearts. Just that. Just our access to God. This is why Jesus died, by the way. 1 Peter will say that he died to bring us back to God. We were separated from the one we were made for, and that is a problem because he is our very purpose. And Jesus came to reconcile that and bring us back to him. That deep, legitimate longing is only filled by the very presence of God and your access to it, which is why the Bible will say things like this. "In your presence, God, is fullness of joy," Psalm 16:11. This is eternal life. That they what do for you? No, that they know you, the only true God and Jesus Christ whom you have sent, John 17:3. Jesus said to him, "I am the way and the truth and the life." I'm it. I am life. Or Jeremiah 9 says, "Let not the wise man boast in his wisdom, the mighty man in his might, the rich man in his riches, but him who boasts what? That he's done great things for me? No, that he understands and knows me." Our boasting is, I know him. I was made for him, and I can be friends with him. I exist for him, and I will be happiest when I am fully at his disposal. That's what it means to be made for a person. If I am made for a person, then my life comes alive when my entire being is submitted to him. And what do you want from me, God? I'm good. Where do you want me to go? As long as I'm at your disposal, I am fulfilling my very purpose. When I'm with him, it's what I'm made for. On the bench, on the field, doesn't matter. As long as I'm yours and I'm where you want me to be. This is why I think John the Baptist, Jesus will name, is the greatest man who ever lived. It's because John is a yes to Jesus when he's in front of the crowds. Amen, Lord. I will make a way. He is a very wildly famous man in Judea at the time. Then Jesus comes on the scene and his fame plummets. Everybody leaves him and he is imprisoned. And he says, yes, let it be. I am so happy because I love the bridegroom and everybody's going to him and I couldn't be more happy. Let me decrease. Increase, decrease, doesn't matter. I'm his. I'm fully at his disposal. I think this is why Mary, the mother of Jesus, is such a big deal. Because when she is presented with this, you're going to bear the Son of God and your whole life is going to be different and it doesn't mean a lot of good things initially. It's going to be hard. She says, behold, I am the bondservant of the Lord. Let it be done to me as you have said. She's fully at his disposal. You want to use me for big, visible things, small, unseen things? I don't care. I'm yours. I'm fully at your disposal because I exist for you. That's why you made me. And if you want to make me and place me here or there, amen, Lord, let it be. And when my heart is in that posture, I come alive because it's what I was made for. Now, I'm concerned that in that you may hear me wrong. That in saying your purpose as a person, I don't actually mean your purpose is go do big things for God. I don't actually mean that. I literally just mean you exist for him and for his pleasure. And you come alive when you're with him. See, the secular says, I do for me. And the religious answer says, I do for God. But the Christian answer says, no, God does for me. It's not about my doing. I don't bring anything to the table. He made me for himself. I'm a sinner. I've broken that covenant with him. He came and fixed it all and brought me back to himself. He does good things for me, and I'm so happy to be a recipient at his side of his good graces toward me. This is the Christian faith. It's not one of achieving but receiving. It's not one of works, it's one of rest, which is why we Sabbath, why that's given to us as a beautiful covenant reminder. He works, you receive. The work we do is one of faith and receiving and trust. We receive him doing good things for us and let ourselves be fully at his disposal. This has so liberated me. I don't know if you can tell from some of the other stories I've told from my life, but I'm a very driven person. Maybe it's my oldest born, my type A, I don't know. I have a degree in finance because math has right answers, and I really like that. Tell me the right answer, because then I can get 100 on a test. It's awesome. Writing is hard. There's like 5 great ways to write something. There's no perfect way, and I hate that. But it's liberated me because God continues to set before me tasks like this one, writing and speaking. And you know what, guys? It's not easy for me. I may seem comfortable here because I've had to do it a lot. You can go ask my husband, who at the book launch party for this book a few weeks ago said about it, Kelly, I know that this is a lot of deaths for you. And it is. It's hard. It's intimidating. And it's tempting to think God needs me to get up here and do something great to make a difference in your life or in somebody's life. It's really tempting to believe that. But I really believe that God doesn't need me. God is the one who does. He does the doing. And he does it on my behalf and on your behalf. And even as he sets before me tasks like this one of writing and speaking, he does it because he has good things for me. I can't tell you how much of my perfectionist tendencies God has sanctified out of me through having to do stuff like this. How much of my fear of man is getting exposed and sanctified. How much of my own sin is coming up in the things he set before me. I hate it. It's not fun, but he's liberating me because he wants to set me free. What he set before me is not because he needs me to do something great for him, even a task like writing a book. I hope people read it and are blessed by it, but even in the writing of it, God is meeting me and changing me. And whatever he's setting in front of you, he has good things for you in it. He's not looking at you going, there's pressure on your life to perform and do something great for me. Saying, I do the doing. Receive. Let me redeem you. Let God redeem you. And let him put you wherever he wants. And as you are letting God redeem you, as you are fully at his disposal wherever he wants you to go, you exist perfectly as he would have you be there, an image bearer, receiving grace from him day in, day out, bearing witness to the world around you, whether that's your kids or your coworkers, neighbors or friends, and in you letting yourself be redeemed by God, being placed where he has set you. People will seek God for themselves through that. It's what Paul says in Acts 17. I want to read you part of his sermon there. It says, the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind and life and breath and everything. God doesn't need us. What a relief. That he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling places. So he's put you in a time and in a place. Why? So that men may seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. He's put you somewhere and he's redeeming you. He wants to do good things for you. He doesn't need you to do good things for him. He's going to do things for you. He wants to redeem you. He wants to bless you. And he's put you in a specific place so that as he's doing that in your life, others would seek God and find him. Amen. What a gift. Now, the question becomes, we can't just do nothing, right? I can't tell you how many times I've walked through contact with people like, but what do I do with my life? Tell me what to do. I can't do that. Sorry, if you were expecting that in this equip night, like a formally laid out plan of now I know exactly how to live. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. I can't tell you what to do, but this is what I can do. Whatever you do, you are called to do it with him and for him. And when you live with him and for him. It will make your life meaningful. That is how we are to live out our purpose. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to prove it with scriptures. So, can't argue with that. That list of 10 things, by the way, this is why I believe that you should have circled all of them. Because every one of those things, you are meant to do it with God and for God. And if you do that thing with God and for God, you are absolutely in line with the purpose he has made, that he's given you as his image bearer. So we do things with God. We see this in Matthew 11:29. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." I don't know if you know what a yoke is. We're not an agrarian culture anymore. But I used to think it was the thing that attached a burden to an animal so that it could pull its load, but it's actually not. A yoke ties two animals together so that they can pull in unison. It is so they can pull something, but the function of the yoke is to take two animals and yoke them together. And so the imagery Jesus is giving us is, take my yoke upon you. I'm under a yoke, and there's a spot for you. Will you come with me? Walk with me. Do your life with me. Do it with me. We see it in John 15, where Jesus says, "Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. But I am the vine and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." What a great promise. Just stay with him and your life will be fruitful. That's a promise. Do your life with God. Just stay with him. It's why Jesus looks at all the disciples and just says, "Follow me." He doesn't look at each of his individual disciples and give them a list. Here's your list, go do that. Here's your list, go do that. He just says, "Follow me. Stay with me. Walk with me. Do life with me." So we do it with God, and then we do life for God. 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatever you do, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all for the glory of God. Whatever you do. Paul has no caveats there. Whatever you do, your list that you wrote, your list of 10 things, whatever it is, do it for God. Colossians 3:17, whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Do it with him and do it for him. That means my week of sick kids, that was not what I planned on. That's the race God has set before me today. And I get to do it with him and his help and abiding in him, and I get to do it for him. I get to care for those kiddos, not for their sake, but for his sake. My life is meaningful. That means when I walk out the door and there's a flat tire, and all of a sudden, great, my to-do list just got erased, and I'm going to be sitting in Discount Tire. Cool. That doesn't sound fun and sounds stressful, and how do I get the kids to school, and I'm looking at a day full of all sorts of unforeseen things. I get to do that with God. All right, Lord, you saw this flat tire coming. Help me today. I get to do it with God, and I get to do it for God. Help me be patient with my kids and with other people in my life today. That's hard work, God, but I want to do it so that you're magnified, so that as I go about my way as an image bearer, that my life bears witness to who you are. Or maybe you're grieving loss. Maybe that's where you're at today. Grief is like a full-time job. I don't know what you've lost in your life, but some of the hardest losses in my life, grieving, gosh, is a hard labor to grieve well. And no one sees it. I get to grieve with God, and I get to grieve for him. God, would you be glorified as I mourn the loss of good things? But good days too, we do with God and for God. When we have those mountaintop experiences, we get to enjoy them with God, for him. When we get to the valley, he's there too. Everything we do is packed with meaning, not because of what we're doing, but because of who is with us, because we were not made to do things. We were made for a person, because in him we live and move and have our being. And I'll just close with this. I think it's so freeing, this truth. If we would live with this in mind, here are some ways I think this is going to set us free, and it's going to fulfill that longing. It frees us to not care so much about efficiency and productivity anymore. I mean, we want our lives to count, but now I can enjoy Jesus with my time and my resources and my energy. I can be more about his presence than productivity. Sometimes we're so driven to use every ounce of our time well that we rush time with God, who we were made for. But then when we see Mary pouring an entire jar of expensive ointment on Jesus' feet and the disciples going, gosh, that was wasteful and inefficient. We could have sold that for 300 denarii, whole year's worth of wages, and helped some people. Jesus rebukes them and says, no, you'll always have the poor. You won't always have me. My presence is more important than doing good. I'm more important. First command, love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Second, then you can love others. I'm now free to enjoy Jesus lavishly, if this is true. If my purpose is a person, man, then I don't have to be that impressive anymore, because he's clearly the hero of the story, not me. And if my life is boring a lot of the time and not impressive and I've got nothing Instagram worthy, that's okay. It's not about me. He does the doing. I'm free to enjoy my unexpected detours in my life because he intends to meet me there, and he's who I'm made for. I'm free to rest. I can take a day off because doing doesn't earn me meaning. God does, and he's in my resting and my working. But I'm also free to work hard. Even the things I don't like that are in front of me. All of us have tasks we don't like, every single one of us. We could list them out probably right now. And even though we don't like them, we can be free to say that. We can see it as something set before us to do with God and for God. And now I have motivation to work hard at that thing. And it's not just a freeing truth. I think this is fulfilling because there's so many things we could say about how the person of God and our access to it meets our deep longing. That's a lot of what my book is about if you want to read more about it. But I at least want to have you hear this. God does not despise our longings. When the disciples come to him and ask about greatness, he doesn't rebuke them. Say, stop caring who's the greatest. He doesn't say that. He says, no, there are great people in my kingdom. It's just you've got your definitions wrong. Chase greatness, just chase the right kind. Jesus doesn't tell his disciples to not care about being seen. He just says you're looking for the wrong audience. You go pray in secret where your Father who sees you is there and will reward you. He cares that you know that you're seen. He clearly tells us how, in plain language, how to make our lives matter. He clearly tells us that we're a unique part of his body, indispensable to his kingdom. He cares about our longings. But we do have to settle this, that there's nothing that this life has to offer that can fulfill that. Only the very person of God will do that. If you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, you'll see a man who reached the mountain of achievement. Whatever you would like to do in this life, he's done it times 10. In every lane. More money, more achievement, more everything, more pleasure, more wisdom. He made it to the top of the mountain that you're trying to climb and I'm trying to climb. And when he got to the top, he looked around and said, you know what? There's nothing here. Nothing more than what was down there, because God was there and God is here. And he concludes this whole message with just fear God and keep his commands. It's about him anyway. But there's also nothing this life can dish out to us that will keep us from purposeful living. Because on the flip side of Ecclesiastes, you have Job, who loses everything. And yet, in his interaction with God, he'll say, I heard about you, but now I see you. I'm okay because I've seen you. Whether it's Job or Ecclesiastes, we gain it all, we lose it all. The conclusion is the same. Life is meaningful because God is in it. My life and your life exists for him, and life is meaningful when we do life with him and for him. And whether he leads us down paths we don't want to go, or paths that we had hoped to go, we know the path doesn't hold the purpose. The path doesn't hold the joy, and the path can't steal the joy. Our purpose is with the person we walk with. Our joy is the person we walk with. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Corrie ten Boom. You should read The Hiding Place if you never have, but I think Corrie's a great example of a person fully at God's disposal if you read her story. She had a very fruitful life of ministry for a long time, was alive during World War II, housed Jews, was in a concentration camp, incredible things, and yet at the end of her life, suffered a stroke and found herself in a position where the only thing she could do was blink. And her assistant is caring for her, writing, and her assistant wrote a book about her time with Corrie, and says she watched Corrie go from busy, active ministry, making videos, preaching the gospel, doing this, to lying still in a bed and receiving care and blinking, learning to communicate with grace and with patience and with calm in her heart and joy. She said, I realized it was much harder for a person like Corrie to do nothing when God's will required it than to do much. But even in her doing nothing, she was okay. Her life had purpose. She existed for God, and she was fully at his disposal, whether he needed her to be active in ministry or receiving care from her assistant. whatever this life throws at us, it has meaning for you and for me and for everyone you interact with, if we will locate it in the person of God and not in what we do. In him we live and we move and we have our being, and that will set us free and fulfill that deep ache we all long for. So if you'll pray with me. Lord, we thank you that you don't despise our deep hunger for more, God. I love that when the disciples came to you, just hungry in their hearts for something awesome and transcendent. I want to be great. Who's the greatest, God? You did not despise their question. You gave them a clear and direct answer. And you did something as small as pick a child up and put him on your lap and say, whoever becomes like this child, a recipient in a relationship, they are truly great. You redirect our longings, you care about them, and you want them to be truly fulfilled in the right ways. So God, in whatever ways we've been chasing meaning outside of just who you are, God, would you help us to see those? See where we put our meaning that's not in you. And give us the grace and the courage to redirect our path, to relocate our sense of purpose and meaning in just the very person of who you are. And would you fill our lives with color and meaning as we do that? As we live in just so many varieties of seasons of joys and sorrows, through it all, God, would you fill us with a deep sense of purpose as we look to you and your doing, not us and our doing. We need your help so desperately for this, God. Give each of us clarity as we walk out of here, where our lives need to be transformed in light of the truths you've given us in your word. In Jesus' name, amen.